It's quiet now, in a way it never used to be. The kind of quiet that lets you hear the rustle of the old oak outside my bedroom window, or the distant clang of a ship's bell from the harbor. Charleston always hums, a low, gentle thrum, but my world felt like it had its own frantic rhythm for years, a discordant beat fueled by worry and an ache that sat just behind my ribs. My restaurant, the Salty Siren, down in the historic district, was my anchor. It was my calm, my purpose. I'd built it from the ground up, a reflection of my drive to create something solid, something lasting, especially after Mom and Dad were gone. Their absence left a gaping hole, and a heavy mantle of responsibility fell on my shoulders, mostly for Owen. Owen, my younger brother. He was a good kid, deep down, but lost. Always chasing the next thrill, always getting into scrapes, always needing a bailout. I loved him fiercely, but it was an exhausting love, constantly laced with fear. Every phone call was a spike of adrenaline, wondering what fresh chaos he'd wrought. For years, I patched him up, picked him up, lectured him, hoped for him. And then, finally, it seemed like he was turning a corner. He'd found a steady job, started paying his own rent, and for the first time in a long time, the calls from him were just to chat, to share good news. The quiet pride I felt, watching him grow, was immense. It felt like I could finally breathe, really breathe, for the first time in forever. My life felt stable, meaningful, complete. I thought, at last, the storms were behind us. I thought we were safe. She arrived like a vibrant splash of color in Owen's otherwise muted world. Lily. He brought her to Sunday dinner, a new tradition we'd started when he seemed to be getting his act together. The moment she walked into my home, she radiated warmth, a captivating energy that was impossible to ignore. Her eyes, a striking shade of green, met mine with an almost unnerving directness, and her smile was wide, genuine, or so I thought. Owen seemed to bloom in her presence, less fidgety, more confident, always looking to her for approval, a gaze that I initially interpreted as adoration. I remember feeling a wave of immense relief wash over me. This woman, I thought, she's good for him. She's the anchor he always needed. She talked about her passion for art, her quiet ambition, her admiration for Owen's resilience. She knew how to listen, how to ask just the right questions, making you feel seen, understood. She had a way of weaving herself into conversations, offering opinions that sounded insightful and charming, never overbearing. I watched Owen, how his shoulders relaxed when she was near, how he'd laugh more freely. I was grateful, truly, deeply grateful. I welcomed her into our small, tight-knit family circle, picturing holidays, shared meals, a future where Owen finally had a steady, loving partner. But even then, faint, almost imperceptible flickers of something else surfaced. Nothing concrete, just a feeling, a brief tightening in my gut. She'd compliment me almost excessively, praise my restaurant with an intensity that felt a little practiced. Sometimes, her gaze would linger a moment too long, a knowing look that made the hairs on my arms prickle. She'd gently steer conversations, subtly redirecting attention, always making sure she was at the center of the dynamic between Owen and me. I remember one evening, she was recounting a story about Owen's past struggles, painting him as more vulnerable, more naive than I knew him to be. A fleeting, cold expression crossed her face when she thought no one was looking, a flash of something calculating in those green eyes. I dismissed it, of course. My own fatigue, maybe. Just adjusting to Owen having a serious partner, a new dynamic. I told myself I was being overly protective, scrutinizing her unfairly. Owen was happy. That was all that mattered. Her integration into our lives became swift, almost seamless. She wasn't just Owen's girlfriend. She became a fixture. She'd often be at the restaurant, initially just visiting Owen for lunch, then offering to help out. "Ben, you look swamped," she'd say, her voice laced with concern. "Let me just quickly organize those invoices for you." Or, "I have a knack for social media. Maybe I could help boost your online presence?" I, trusting and grateful for any help, especially with the demanding hours of running a restaurant, readily agreed. She had a way of making it seem like she was doing me a favor, when in reality, she was meticulously embedding herself into the very arteries of my business. Soon, the small favors escalated into something more substantial. Owen needed a new car for his job, she'd suggest. And wouldn't it be great if Ben could help with the down payment? Just as a loan, of course? Or there was a fantastic investment opportunity for Owen, a chance to finally build his own future, and Ben, with his financial acumen, should really back it. The amounts were never huge at first, just enough to feel like a brother helping a brother, a protective older sibling securing his wayward sibling's future. Each request came wrapped in layers of plausible logic and fervent promises from Owen, reinforced by Lily's earnest eyes and convincing arguments. But with her increasing presence came a subtle shift in Owen. He started spending less time with me alone, always with Lily. When we did talk, his eyes would often dart towards her, as if seeking permission or cues. His conversation became peppered with criticisms that sounded suspiciously like Lily's observations. "You're always so traditional. Ben, you need to modernize the menu." Or, "You worry too much. Ben, just let go a little." The easy camaraderie we once shared, the unspoken understanding, began to fray. He grew secretive, defensive, especially if I ever voiced a slight concern about Lily. "You just don't want me to be happy, do you, Ben?" He'd snap, a familiar accusation, but one now infused with a new, sharper edge. My gut churned. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach, a persistent unease that I tried to quell with reason. "He's happy, Ben. He's finally happy. Don't ruin it." The psychological pressure was insidious. It wasn't direct confrontation, not yet. It was the feeling of being constantly misunderstood, of my good intentions being twisted into control, of my love being seen as a cage. Lily was always there, a silent shadow, observing, absorbing, then subtly weaponizing everything against me. She'd play the mediator, smoothing over perceived tensions, but always with a delicate hand that nudged Owen further into her corner and me further into isolation. I started to doubt my own perceptions, my own memories. Was I truly so overbearing? Was I really trying to hold Owen back? The quiet hum of Charleston started to feel like a frantic buzz in my ears, and my solid ground began to feel like shifting sand. The restaurant's books, once a source of quiet pride and order, began to tell a different story. Small discrepancies appeared first, a few missing invoices here, an unusual expense there. I attributed it to the rush, to my own oversight. But the pattern grew clearer, bolder. Larger sums started vanishing. It wasn't just a few $100s, it was thousands, then tens of thousands. The Salty Siren, my anchor, my pride, felt like it was slowly bleeding out. My meticulous records, the ones I had trusted Lily to help organize, were suddenly incomplete, contradictory. I tried to talk to Owen. I remember one evening, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and the distant clang of harbor bells. I laid out some of the numbers on the kitchen table. "Owen," I said, my voice tight with worry, "something's wrong here. A significant amount of money is unaccounted for. This last quarter, it's a problem." I expected alarm, concern, maybe even a shared sense of urgency. Instead, he bristled. His gaze, usually open with me, was guarded, defensive. Lily, who had been quietly making tea, suddenly materialized beside him, her hand gently resting on his arm. "Ben," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you're always so stressed about money. Owen's been working so hard on his new venture, you know. He needs funds to get it off the ground." "His new venture?" I asked, my brow furrowing. "What new venture?" "Owen, you never mentioned anything." Owen avoided my eyes. It's something Lily and I are working on, a surprise. You wouldn't understand, Ben. You're always so focused on the restaurant. We need to take risks to get ahead, not just stick to your old ways." Lily stepped in, her voice now laced with a practiced concern. "Ben, with all your stress, sometimes you misplace things. Remember last month, you were convinced you'd paid for that new fryer twice? We found the receipt in your old jacket pocket." She smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. "It's easy to get confused when you're overworked." I stared at her, then at Owen. A new fryer? I'd never bought a new fryer. The memory she conjured was so vivid, so specific, yet utterly false. My mind raced, grappling with the disconnect. Had I? Had I really misremembered something so fundamental? The room spun slightly. My own meticulous nature, my memory, my sanity, they were all suddenly under attack. I felt disoriented, like the ground had dropped out from under me. Owen, leaning into Lily's touch, looked at me with an expression of mingled pity and exasperation. "You really need to relax, Ben," he said, his voice flat. "You're seeing things that aren't there." The accusation stung, twisting my insides. I felt a cold dread creep through me, a primal instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. But every attempt to articulate it was met with a wall of denial, bolstered by Lily's carefully constructed narrative. The financial drain continued, now faster, bolder. My restaurant, my home, felt infected, and I was losing my brother, piece by agonizing. Piece, to her chilling influence. I was being gaslighted, manipulated, and I was too close, too desperate to believe in Owen, to see it clearly for what it was. That disorienting conversation haunted me. The feeling of doubt, of my own memory being unreliable, festered. But the numbers didn't lie. They kept shrinking. My gut screamed louder than my doubts. I couldn't shake the feeling that Lily's new friar story was a calculated lie, and that the missing funds were far more sinister than Owen's secret venture. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing everything else. I began my own investigation, discreetly at first. I didn't trust anyone fully, not anymore. I started comparing my official bank statements with the digital records Lily claimed to be managing. I went through old paper receipts, cross-referencing every transaction. Late nights became my norm, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the grim reality. The pit in my stomach grew into a black hole. What I found wasn't just discrepancies. It was a systematic, calculated theft. Funds siphoned off in small increments at first, then larger amounts, transferred to various accounts. Not just Owen's, but shell accounts. Some opened with what appeared to be Owen's forged signature, others in names I didn't recognize. The trail led directly back to Lily. There were records of luxury purchases, designer clothes, expensive jewelry, even a significant down payment on an apartment in a swanky part of town, all paid for with money drained from the Salty Siren. My money. The final, undeniable piece of evidence was a series of wire transfers, each signed digitally with access credentials that only Lily and I had. Except I hadn't made them. They were sent to an offshore account, and the recipient was a name that rang a faint bell, a distant cousin of Lily's, someone I'd briefly met once. The total amounted to well over $100,000. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath. It wasn't just financial malfeasance. It was a profound, soul-crushing betrayal. Not just by Lily, but by Owen. He had to know, at least some of it, or he was so deeply manipulated that he was blind. The anger that surged through me was molten, quickly followed by a wave of cold, desolate despair. My brother, my one remaining family, had been weaponized against me, his loyalty poisoned. All those years I'd spent trying to protect him, trying to give him a stable future, had been used as a lever to pry open my trust, to make me vulnerable. I remember staring at the screen, the figures blurring, my hands trembling. The air felt heavy, suffocating. My carefully constructed life, the stability I'd fought so hard for, was crumbling around me. But amidst the ruin, a chilling clarity emerged. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't losing my mind. I was a victim of a calculating, heartless con. And Owen was her co-conspirator, or her biggest mark. Either way, the man I thought I knew, the brother I loved, was gone, replaced by a stranger manipulated into an enemy. I felt a fierce, burning need for justice, for truth. I couldn't let this continue. I knew I had to confront them, both of them. I gathered all the evidence, printed out statements, highlighted the damning transfers, organized it all into a neat, undeniable file. My hands moved with a purpose born of icy determination. I would lay it all out. I would show Owen the truth, the irrefutable proof of Lily's treachery. And I expected him to see it, to understand, to finally choose me, his brother, over her. I set a date, a Sunday dinner, just like old times, but this time, it would be the end of an era, one way or another. The aroma of my mother's pot roast hung heavy in the air that Sunday, a cruel mockery of the warmth and tradition it once symbolized. My hands felt clammy as I carved the meat, the knife almost slipping from my grip. Owen sat across from me, a little too jovial, a forced lightness in his laugh. Lily, radiant as ever, wore a dress I knew was purchased with my money, a small, knowing smirk playing on her lips whenever our eyes met. My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate drumbeat anticipating the inevitable explosion. So, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I think we need to talk about the restaurant finances. I placed the neatly organized folder on the table, sliding it towards Owen. There have been some significant irregularities, and I've been looking into them. Owen's cheerfulness vanished, replaced by a familiar defensiveness. Ben, we talked about this. You're always obsessing over money. It's fine. No, Owen, it's not fine. My voice rose slightly, the carefully constructed calm starting to crack. It's $150,000, Owen. And it's gone. I pushed the folder open, pointing to the highlighted transfers, the shell accounts, the luxury purchases. This money didn't go into a secret venture of yours. It went into Lily's accounts. It went to buy her expensive clothes, her jewelry, her new apartment. Owen stared at the documents, his face blanching, but then his eyes darted to Lily, who sat perfectly still, her green eyes fixed on me, devoid of any emotion. Then, as if on cue, his expression hardened, shifting from shock to anger, fueled by her silent presence. "You're lying, Ben," he yelled, pushing the papers away, sending a fork clattering to the floor. "You're always trying to ruin things for me. You can't stand that I'm finally happy, that I have someone who actually believes in me, who supports me." He looked at Lily, his gaze filled with a desperate devotion. "Lily would never do this. You're just jealous, Ben. You're trying to drive us apart." My breath hitched. The words, flung at me with such venom, struck deeper than any accusation of theft. It was his complete, utter blindness, his betrayal, that gutted me. He actually believed her. He was defending her. Then Lily laughed. A low, soft sound that was more chilling than any scream. She reached across the table, picked up one of the highlighted bank statements, and looked at me, a cold, triumphant glint in her eyes. "Oh, Benjamin," she purred, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "You really are too predictable, aren't you? And so easy to take advantage of." She then slowly tore the page in half, her gaze never leaving mine. "Yes, I did it. Every last penny. And Owen." She wrapped an arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. "He's my only true ally. Not you." The world fractured. Her confession, delivered with such casual cruelty, coupled with Owen's unwavering loyalty to her, shattered something deep inside me. It wasn't just the money, not just the restaurant. It was the complete obliteration of trust, of family, of my own judgment. I felt a cold wave wash over me, a numbness that started in my chest and spread through my limbs. My vision tunneled. Owen, yelling at me about my jealousy, his face contorted in disgust, blurred into the background. Lily's chilling smirk was the last thing I clearly saw before I felt a profound, suffocating darkness descend. I don't remember much after that. Just a blur of hollow days, spent mostly in bed, the curtains drawn, the world outside a distant, unbearable hum. The pain was physical, a constant ache in my chest, a feeling of being hollowed out. Depression, dark and crushing, took hold. I questioned everything. My instincts, my love for Owen, my entire identity as a protector, as a good brother. Had I been so naive, so foolishly hopeful? The man who had carefully built his life, his business, his sense of purpose, felt utterly annihilated. Days bled into weeks. The restaurant, mercifully, was mostly on autopilot with a trusted manager, but even that felt like a burden. There were moments when I considered just walking away from it all, letting the darkness consume me. But somewhere, buried deep beneath the rubble of my broken spirit, a tiny spark flickered. It was the image of my parents, their resilience, their unwavering belief in building something lasting. It was the taste of their pot roast, ironically, a reminder of the love that once filled my home, a love that deserved to be honored, not extinguished by betrayal. Slowly, agonizingly, I started to pick up the pieces. The first step was practical, changing all bank accounts, implementing stricter controls at the restaurant, revoking every single access Lily had ever had. It was a tedious, painful process, each transaction a fresh wound, a reminder of what had been stolen. I consulted a lawyer, but the legal battle felt too draining, too public, and frankly, I just wanted her out of my life, out of my head. I chose to focus on rebuilding, on reclaiming what was mine, rather than pursuing a vengeful justice. Then came the harder part, severing the ties. Owen sent a few angry texts, fueled by Lily, accusing me of being heartless, of destroying their future. I tried, one last time, to reach out, to explain the depth of her manipulation, to show him the irrefutable proof. But his mind was a fortress, guarded by her lies. He believed her. He had chosen her. The painful truth finally sunk in. I had lost my brother. And to save myself, I had to let him go. I blocked his number. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, a decision that tore a fresh hole in my soul, but it was a necessary amputation. The first steps towards leaving the emotional wreckage behind, towards rebuilding myself, began. It's been almost 2 years since that Sunday dinner. The Salty Siren, my anchor, my sanctuary, is thriving again. More than thriving, actually. The financial controls I implemented are ironclad, and I'm more involved than ever, but in a healthier way. I've invested in new technologies, streamlined operations, and even launched a successful new menu, a subtle nod to modernization, but on my own terms. The restaurant now feels troll. Why mine again, cleansed of the insidious presence that once sought to devour it. It's a testament to resilience, a symbol of what can be rebuilt even after the most devastating collapse. The healing hasn't been linear. There were many dark days, many moments of doubt and residual pain. I sought therapy, and it helped immensely. I learned to untangle the shame and self-blame, to recognize that my protective nature, my trust, were not weaknesses, but qualities that had been cruelly exploited. I learned about gaslighting, about the insidious nature of emotional abuse, and that realization, in itself, was liberating. I wasn't crazy, I was prey. I've reconnected with old friends, ones I'd unknowingly pushed away during that tumultuous period. They were there, unwavering, reminding me of who I was before the storm. I've started exploring Charleston again, rediscovering its quiet beauty, the simple pleasures I'd neglected. I even met someone new, a kind, genuine woman who appreciates my quiet strength and my love for my restaurant. It's a tentative relationship, built on honesty and slow trust, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of deception I once endured. There's no rush, no pressure, just a gentle unfolding of shared moments. As for Owen and Lily, I hear snippets, rumors through the grapevine. Their ventures apparently fizzled, and they've moved on from Charleston. Sometimes, a pang of sadness still hits me, a ghost of the brother I once knew. I still hold hope, a tiny, flickering candle, that one day Owen will see the truth, but I've also accepted that it might never happen. My personal growth, my peace, can no longer be contingent on his awakening. I have had to release that poisoned bond, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. The quiet now, in my home, in my heart, is different. It's not the tense quiet of waiting for the next shoe to drop. It's the deep, rich quiet of peace. The scars remain, subtle reminders of a painful past, but they no longer define me. They are just marks, showing where I was broken and where I grew back, stronger, wiser, and irrevocably free. I learned that sometimes the hardest step is letting go, and that true liberation often comes from the most profound betrayals. My life is mine again, whole and hopeful, and for that, I am eternally grateful.